The city knew the sound of that convoy. The moment 8 black SUVs rolled onto the street, conversation stopped. Shopkeepers pulled their children closer. Drivers cleared the road without being told. Even the police looked the other way. Everyone knew who was inside. The most feared mafia boss in the country. A man whose name was spoken in whispers. A man who never smiled, never forgave, and never showed a single emotion, not even at the funerals of the people closest to him. So when his convoy suddenly screeched to a halt in the middle of a crowded street, panic spread instantly. People thought a rival had appeared. Others expected gunfire. His bodyguards jumped out first, scanning rooftops and reaching for their weapons. Their eyes searched every corner, ready to eliminate any threat before it came close to their boss. But the boss wasn't looking at the crowd. He wasn't looking at an enemy. He was staring at an old street musician standing on the sidewalk with a battered violin. The musician's clothes were faded. His shoes were worn out. A small hat sat on the ground with only a few crumpled bills inside. He looked like someone the city had forgotten. Yet as his bow glided across the strings, a gentle melody drifted through the air. The mafia boss froze. His breathing became uneven. His hands that had never trembled while signing death orders or facing armed enemies, suddenly began to shake. Then, in a voice barely louder than a whisper, he gave an order no one expected. "Play that song again." The entire street fell silent. The bodyguards looked at one another in confusion. They had protected this man for over 20 years. They had seen him survive assassination attempts, bury trusted allies, and build an empire feared across the nation. But they had never seen tears in his eyes. Not once. The old musician hesitated before slowly lifting the violin again. As the melody filled the air for a second time, something inside the mafia boss finally broke. A tear rolled down his cheek. Then another. Within seconds, the man everyone believed had no heart was openly crying in the middle of the street. No one dared speak. No one dared move. Because they all knew they had just witnessed something impossible. What none of them knew was that this forgotten melody belonged to someone he had spent 25 years searching for. Someone he believed was gone forever. And before the sun set that day, the truth hidden inside that simple song would uncover a secret powerful enough to shake his empire, expose a decades-old betrayal, and reunite a family that fate had cruelly torn apart. Stay with me until the very end, because this is a story of love, loss, redemption, and one unforgettable melody that changed everything. The black SUVs rolled through the heart of the city like a moving storm. Their polished exteriors reflected the afternoon sun, while their dark-tinted windows hid the faces of the men inside. Store owners hurried to pull customers indoors. Street vendors quietly packed their goods. Even impatient drivers waiting at the intersection lowered their eyes instead of honking. Everyone knew better. When that convoy appeared, the safest thing to do was disappear. Inside the lead SUV sat Alessandro De Luca, the most feared mafia boss in the country. At 48 years old, Alessandro had built an empire that reached every corner of the city. Politicians feared crossing him. Criminals dreamed of earning his respect. His enemies either vanished or learned never to challenge him again. Yet anyone who truly knew him would tell you something stranger than his power. He never smiled. Not once in the last 25 years. His face remained as cold as carved stone, no matter what happened around him. Beside him sat his longtime bodyguard, Marco. "We'll arrive at the warehouse in 12 minutes, Marco said while checking his watch. Alessandro gave a silent nod. He wasn't thinking about business. He stared through the window at the passing streets, though his eyes seemed focused on memories only he could see. 25 years earlier, his life had been different. Before the empire. Before the bloodshed. Before fear became his language. There had been laughter. There had been music. And there had been a little girl named Isabella. She was only 5 years old when she disappeared. Official reports claim she died in an explosion that destroyed a countryside villa belonging to Alessandro's family. The fire had burned so fiercely that investigators recovered almost nothing. Everyone told him to accept the tragedy. Everyone insisted there was no hope. But Alessandro never believed them. He searched for years. Private investigators, former soldiers, corrupt officials, even rival criminal organizations. He spent fortunes chasing rumors that always ended in disappointment. Eventually, the world believed he had given up. The truth was far more painful. He simply stopped talking about her. The only thing he never stopped carrying was a tiny silver music box hidden inside his jacket. Every night before sleeping, he opened it for exactly 30 seconds. Its delicate melody reminded him of happier days, when his daughter would laugh and spin around the living room while his wife softly sang along. After those 30 seconds, he would close the lid. The music stopped. So did the memories. That was the only way he knew how to survive. The convoy slowed as traffic thickened near the city's oldest marketplace. The area bustled with life. Fruit sellers shouted prices. Children chased one another between market stalls. Tourists admired handmade crafts. Street performers filled the air with music, hoping for a few coins from passing strangers. Alessandro rarely noticed any of it. His attention remained fixed ahead. Then, a single violin note floated through the open window. His eyes widened. Marco noticed immediately. "Boss?" Alessandro didn't answer. Another note followed. Then another. It wasn't just music. It was a melody. One he hadn't heard in 25 years. His heartbeat quickened. "No." He whispered. The violin continued. Every note matched the lullaby his late wife used to sing while rocking little Isabella to sleep. No recording of that song had ever existed. His wife had written it herself. Only 3 people had ever known the complete melody. His wife, his daughter, and Alessandro. "Stop the convoy." Marco blinked. "Boss?" "I said stop." The driver slammed the brakes. The sudden halt echoed through the street. The SUVs behind them stopped one after another. Within seconds, nearly 20 armed bodyguards stepped out, scanning rooftops and surrounding buildings for danger. Pedestrians scattered in panic. Some thought a gunfight was about to begin. Others ducked behind parked cars. But Alessandro ignored the chaos. He stepped out of the SUV slowly, his polished shoes touching the pavement as the haunting melody continued drifting through the crowded marketplace. His bodyguards formed a protective circle around him. "Find the source," Marco ordered. The men moved quickly through the crowd. Then one of them pointed toward a narrow sidewalk near an old fountain. There, standing beneath the shade of a weathered oak tree, was an elderly street musician. His grey hair peeked from beneath a faded cap. His coat was patched in several places. His violin looked almost as old as he was. At his feet sat a worn hat containing only a handful of coins. Completely unaware of the attention he had drawn, the old man kept playing with his eyes closed, lost in the beautiful melody. Alessandro took one slow step forward. Then another. Every note struck his heart like a forgotten memory. His breathing became uneven. His hands began to tremble. Marco stared in disbelief. In over 2 decades of loyal service, he had never seen the boss react this way to anything. Alessandro stopped just a few feet from the musician. The old man finished the final note, opened his eyes, and smiled politely at the sharply dressed stranger standing before him. "Would you like to hear another song, sir?" he asked gently. Alessandro's lips parted, but no words came out. Finally, his voice broke into a whisper. "Who taught you that melody?" The old musician's smile slowly faded. He looked into Alessandro's eyes as though recognizing something he never expected to see. Then he quietly replied, I've been waiting 25 years for someone to ask me that question. The marketplace fell into complete silence. Even the usual noise of bargaining, passing cars, and children laughing seemed to disappear. Alessandro De Luca stared at the elderly violinist as if time itself had stopped. I've been waiting 25 years for someone to ask me that question. The words echoed in his mind. Marco instinctively stepped forward, placing himself between the boss and the old man. "Who are you?" he demanded. "And how do you know that song?" The old musician remained calm. His weathered hands gently rested on the violin instead of reaching for the few coins lying in his hat. "My name is Gabriel," he replied softly. "I don't know who you are, but I know why you're here." The bodyguards exchanged uneasy glances. No one spoke to Alessandro with such confidence. Alessandro raised one hand, signaling his men to stay back. "Answer me," he said, his voice low but trembling. "Where did you learn that melody?" Gabriel looked at the violin for a long moment before answering. 25 years ago, I worked as a music teacher at St. Helena Children's Home." Alessandro's heartbeat quickened. He remembered that place. It had been mentioned once in an investigation years earlier, but every record connected to it had mysteriously disappeared before his investigators could learn more. "There was a little girl there," Gabriel continued. "She couldn't have been older than 5. She never told anyone her real surname. Every night before bed, she hummed this exact lullaby." Alessandro's breathing grew heavier. "What was her name?" The old man hesitated. "She said her name was Bella." Alessandro felt the world tilt beneath his feet. Bella. That was what he and his wife had lovingly called Isabella. Only family members knew the nickname. Marco noticed the color draining from Alessandro's face. "Boss!" But Alessandro barely heard him. "What happened to her?" he asked. Gabriel sighed deeply. "She stayed at the home for only a few months. She was frightened all the time. Whenever someone asked about her parents, she cried and said they would come for her." A painful silence settled between them. One night, Gabriel continued, a woman arrived after dark. She claimed she was Bella's aunt. She carried official papers, and the director handed the little girl over without asking many questions. Alessandro's jaw tightened. "My investigators searched every orphanage in the country." Gabriel nodded. They would never have found her. A week after Bella left, St. Helena burned to the ground. Marco frowned. "Burned?" "Yes," Gabriel replied. "Every file, every photograph, every adoption record, gone." The authorities called it an electrical fire. Alessandro knew better. Too many fires. Too many missing records. Too many dead ends. Someone had erased every trail leading to his daughter. He reached into his jacket and slowly removed the small silver music box he had carried for 25 years. The old musician's eyes widened. "I haven't seen one of those in decades." Alessandro carefully opened the lid. A delicate melody filled the air. It was the same lullaby Gabriel had been playing. The old man's eyes filled with tears. "That's it," he whispered. "Exactly the same." Alessandro closed the music box. "My wife composed this song herself." Gabriel looked stunned. "Then," he whispered, "the little girl was telling the truth." Before Alessandro could ask another question, an elderly woman pushed through the growing crowd. "Gabriel," she called. "You forgot your medicine again." She stopped abruptly after noticing the armed bodyguards. "I'm sorry," she said nervously. "I didn't realize." Gabriel smiled reassuringly. "It's all right, Maria." Maria looked at Alessandro, then back at Gabriel. "Are these the people asking about Bella?" Alessandro's eyes locked onto hers. "You knew her too?" Maria nodded slowly. "I was a cook at St. Helena. Bella was the sweetest child there." She smiled sadly. She loved drawing little houses with flowers outside. Every picture had the same thing. What? Alessandro asked urgently. A large oak tree. His heart skipped a beat. The family estate where Isabella had grown up had only one remarkable feature. A centuries-old oak tree standing beside the lake. No newspaper had ever mentioned it. No police report had described it. Only someone who had lived there would know. Maria reached into the cloth bag hanging from her shoulder. I never thought this would matter again. She carefully unfolded a yellowed piece of paper. It was worn with age, its edges brittle. I found this after Bella left. I couldn't bring myself to throw it away. She handed it to Alessandro. His fingers trembled as he took it. It was a child's drawing. A little house. A lake. A giant oak tree. 3 smiling stick figures holding hands. Above them, written in shaky handwriting, were 4 simple words. Me, Mommy, Daddy, home. Alessandro's vision blurred. A tear landed on the paper. Then another. For 25 years, he had searched for proof that his daughter had survived. Now, he was holding it in his own hands. But before he could gather his thoughts, Marco's phone suddenly rang. He answered immediately. His expression changed within seconds. He lowered the phone and looked directly at Alessandro. Boss! What is it? Our intelligence team just uncovered something. Marco swallowed hard. They found the name of the woman who claimed to be Bella's aunt. Alessandro's eyes narrowed. Who was she? Marco hesitated. She wasn't family. The marketplace became eerily quiet again. She was your late wife's personal nurse. The word struck Alessandro harder than any bullet ever had. She was your late wife's personal nurse. For a moment, he simply stared at Marco. No, he said quietly. That's impossible. Marco wished he could say he was mistaken. I thought the same thing, boss. But the records match. Her name was Elena Rossi. Alessandro felt his chest tighten. Elena. He remembered her well. She had cared for his wife during the final months before Isabella disappeared. She was kind, patient, and always carried a gentle smile. Alessandro had trusted her enough to let her stay in their home. Then, after the explosion, Elena had vanished without a trace. At the time, everyone assumed she had died in the fire. Now he realized she hadn't. She had disappeared. Where is she now? Alessandro asked. Marco looked disappointed. She disappeared 25 years ago. There are no recent records. No bank accounts. No passport activity. It's like she vanished from the face of the earth. Alessandro closed his eyes. Someone had planned this. Someone had spent decades erasing every clue. He carefully folded the child's drawing and placed it inside his jacket beside the silver music box. Then he turned to Gabriel. Everything you remember, every detail, no matter how small. I need to hear it. Gabriel nodded. There is one thing. What is it? The night Bella left, I overheard Elena arguing with the director. What were they saying? Gabriel frowned, trying to remember. The director kept asking if this was really the only way. And Elena? She said something I'll never forget. Gabriel looked directly into Alessandro's eyes. If he finds her now, they'll kill her too. Alessandro froze. They'll kill her too. Not me. Not Elena. Her. His daughter. That meant Isabella hadn't been taken for ransom. She had been taken to save her life. But from whom? Marco's phone buzzed again. This time it was Luca, the head of Alessandro's intelligence division. Marco answered immediately. Yes? A few seconds later, his face changed completely. What? Alessandro stepped closer. What happened? Marco lowered the phone slowly. Luca found something inside the old police archives. Speak. The explosion wasn't the first attack. Alessandro's expression darkened. There was another attempt on your family's lives 3 days earlier. His heart skipped a beat. I was never told. You weren't supposed to know. Marco handed him the phone. Luca spoke urgently. Boss, someone buried the original investigation. The report says an unidentified sniper was caught outside your estate 3 days before the explosion. Alessandro's voice became ice cold. Who ordered the report sealed? We don't know. And the sniper? He was found dead before he could be questioned. Silence. Then Luca added one final sentence. The officer who wrote the report also disappeared 2 days later. Alessandro slowly ended the call. This was bigger than he had imagined. For 25 years, he had believed the explosion destroyed his family. Now he knew something terrifying. The explosion had only covered up a much larger conspiracy. He looked toward the old violinist. Gabriel, after Bella left, did you ever hear anything else? Gabriel thought for a moment. Only one rumor. What rumor? That Elena escaped overseas with the little girl. Alessandro's eyes lit with hope. Did anyone say where? Gabriel shook his head. No. Hope disappeared as quickly as it had arrived. Just then Maria spoke again. Wait. Everyone turned toward her. There was a letter. Gabriel looked surprised. A letter? Maria nodded. I almost forgot. She hurried back to the small apartment above the bakery where she lived. The bodyguards watched every entrance to the street while Alessandro waited below. 5 long minutes passed. Finally, Maria returned carrying a small wooden box covered in dust. My husband told me to throw this away years ago, she said. I couldn't. She opened it carefully. Inside were old photographs, faded postcards, and a sealed envelope. The envelope had only 3 handwritten words. For Bella. Alessandro's hands trembled as he picked it up. The paper had yellowed with age, but the wax seal remained unbroken. He looked at Maria. You never opened it. She shook her head. It wasn't mine. With great care, Alessandro broke the seal. Inside was a single folded letter. He unfolded it slowly. The handwriting was unmistakable. It belonged to Elena. His pulse raced as he began to read aloud. If you're reading this, it means I failed to keep my promise. His voice cracked. She is alive. Everyone stopped breathing. I took her because they were coming to kill her. Alessandro's knees nearly gave way. The letter continued. I know you will hate me for stealing your daughter, but it was the only way to save her. Trust no one inside your own organization. Marco looked up instantly. Alessandro's face turned pale. Inside your own organization. The enemy had never been outside. The betrayal had come from within. Then Alessandro reached the final line of the letter. His eyes widened in disbelief. Without saying a word, he handed the letter to Marco. Marco read the final sentence once. Then he read it again. His face drained of color. Boss! What is it? Gabriel asked nervously. Marco looked at Alessandro. She named the man who ordered Isabella's murder. The old marketplace suddenly felt colder. Alessandro slowly raised his eyes. His voice was barely a whisper. He's still alive. The old marketplace seemed to hold its breath. No one spoke. No one moved. Marco lowered the letter with shaking hands, unable to believe the name written on the final line. For 25 years, Alessandro had hunted enemies across continents. He had survived betrayals, wars, and assassination attempts. Yet he had never imagined the greatest threat had been standing beside him from the very beginning. Who is it? Gabriel asked quietly. Alessandro took the letter back and folded it with great care. The fewer people who know, the safer you'll be. Gabriel nodded in understanding. Whoever had orchestrated the kidnapping had already burned an orphanage, erased police records, silenced witnesses, and hidden the truth for decades. If that person discovered Gabriel and Maria were helping Alessandro, their lives would be in danger. Alessandro turned to Marco. Take them somewhere secure. Marco immediately understood. I know a place. Within minutes, 2 SUVs quietly left the marketplace with Gabriel and Maria under heavy protection. Only after they were safely on their way did Alessandro speak again. Call Luca. Marco dialed immediately. Luca answered on the first ring. Boss. I want everything on the man named in Elena's letter. You'll have it. No, Alessandro interrupted. I want everything in the next hour. There was a brief silence. Understood. The convoy pulled away from the marketplace and headed toward Alessandro's private estate on the outskirts of the city. Unlike the luxurious mansions owned by wealthy businessmen, Alessandro's home resembled a fortress. High stone walls surrounded the property. Armed guards watched every entrance. Cameras covered every blind spot. Yet despite all the security, Alessandro had never truly felt safe there. Not since losing his family. He walked directly into his private study. On one wall hung photographs from the life he rarely allowed himself to remember. His wedding. His wife smiling beside the lake. Little Isabella laughing beneath the enormous oak tree. He stared at the last photograph for a long time. I'm coming for you, he whispered. An hour later, Luca arrived carrying a thick file. I checked every record we have. He placed the folder on the desk. Alessandro opened it slowly. The first page contained a familiar face. His blood ran cold. Victor Romano. Alessandro's oldest friend. The man who had helped him build his criminal empire. The man he trusted more than anyone. Marco couldn't hide his shock. It can't be. It is, Luca replied grimly. He began laying out photographs across the desk. Bank transfers. Secret property purchases. Old surveillance images. Hidden business deals. For 25 years, Luca explained, Victor quietly expanded his own network while staying in your shadow. Alessandro remained silent. 3 months before the explosion, Luca continued, Victor secretly met with several rival families. Marco frowned. Why? Luca slid another photograph forward. Because he wanted your empire. The room fell silent. Everything suddenly made sense. If Alessandro's wife and daughter disappeared. If Alessandro was broken by grief. Victor would become the only man capable of helping him rebuild. Instead of stealing the empire by force, he would inherit Alessandro's complete trust. And that was exactly what happened. For 25 years, Victor had stood beside him, attended family memorials, comforted him after every failed search, even encouraged him to stop looking for Isabella. The betrayal was almost unimaginable. Alessandro slowly closed the file. Where is he now? Luca answered immediately. He'll be at tomorrow night's charity gala. Marco looked confused. A charity gala? Luca nodded. He hosted every year. The irony was unbearable. The man responsible for destroying a family had spent decades pretending to be one of the city's greatest philanthropists. Alessandro stood. We're going. Marco hesitated. Boss, if Victor knows Elena survived long enough to write that letter, he'll realize someone uncovered the truth. Before anyone could respond, alarms suddenly echoed throughout the estate. Red warning lights began flashing. A guard's voice crackled over the security radio. Incoming vehicles! Another guard shouted. Multiple armed SUVs approaching the front gate. Marco rushed toward the security monitors. His expression hardened instantly. There are at least 15 vehicles. Luca looked stunned. That's impossible. No one should know we're here. A deafening explosion shook the mansion. The front gate disappeared in a cloud of smoke. Gunfire erupted outside. Bullets shattered windows across the first floor. One of the guards screamed into the radio. They're breaking through. Marco grabbed his rifle. They came to destroy the evidence. Alessandro calmly reached into a hidden compartment inside his desk. He removed a pistol that had belonged to his late father. Then he picked up Elena's letter and slipped it inside his jacket. No, he said quietly. They came to finish what they started 25 years ago. Another explosion rocked the estate. The lights flickered. Footsteps echoed through the main hallway. The attackers were already inside. Then Alessandro heard a voice calling from downstairs. A voice he knew better than his own. Alessandro? It was Victor. I know you're in there. Alessandro slowly looked toward the staircase. His oldest friend had not come to negotiate. He had come to make sure the truth died forever. The sound of Victor Romano's voice echoed through the mansion. Alessandro? It was calm. Confident. Almost friendly. The kind of voice that had once offered advice over dinner, celebrated victories, and mourned losses beside him. Now it carried only betrayal. Marco raised his rifle. Boss, give the order. Alessandro slowly shook his head. No. The gunfire outside had begun to fade. Victor's men had already taken control of the first floor. They weren't here to wage a long battle. They were here to erase the truth. Alessandro walked toward the grand staircase, his father's pistol hanging loosely at his side. Marco and Luca exchanged worried glances before following him. At the bottom of the stairs stood Victor, dressed in an expensive black suit. Around him were nearly 20 armed men. He smiled. I was hoping we'd never have this conversation. Alessandro stopped halfway down the staircase. For 25 years, I called you my brother. Victor sighed. And for 25 years, I protected everything we built. You murdered my family. Victor's smile disappeared. I didn't murder them. You ordered it. I ordered your empire to survive. The words made Marco's blood boil. Victor looked directly at Alessandro. You had become weak. You wanted to leave this life for your wife and daughter. If you had walked away, every rival family would have destroyed everything we spent years building. So you kidnapped my child. Victor remained silent. Alessandro reached into his jacket and held up Elena's letter. She told me everything. For the first time, Victor's confident expression cracked. So, you found the letter. You failed. Victor laughed bitterly. No, Alessandro. I succeeded. You lost your family. You became stronger. You built an empire no one dared challenge. You became exactly the leader this organization needed. Alessandro stared at him in disbelief. Victor actually believed he had done the right thing. My daughter grew up without parents, Alessandro said quietly. My wife died believing I'd never find our little girl. Victor looked away. Those were unfortunate sacrifices. Alessandro's voice became ice cold. No. They were unforgivable crimes. Before Victor could respond, dozens of police sirens filled the air outside. Victor frowned. What is this? Luca smiled. I wasn't just gathering evidence. I've been sending it to the authorities for the past hour. Victor's face turned pale. Within seconds, loudspeakers surrounded the estate. Victor Romano and everyone inside, this property is surrounded. Lay down your weapons. Several of Victor's men immediately lowered their guns. Others backed away in fear. Victor realized it was over. He looked at Alessandro one last time. You could have ruled the world. Alessandro slowly shook his head. I would have traded every dollar, every mansion, every ounce of power, just to watch my daughter grow up. Victor dropped his weapon. Minutes later, he was led away in handcuffs. For the first time in 25 years, justice had finally caught up with him. 3 months later, the investigation uncovered records hidden in another country. Elena had survived for several years after rescuing Isabella. Before dying from illness, she had entrusted the young girl to a loving family living hundreds of miles away, fearing Victor would eventually find them. Isabella had grown into a talented young musician. She had inherited her mother's beautiful voice and her father's determined spirit. When Alessandro finally met her, neither of them spoke at first. 25 years of pain could not be erased with words. Instead, Isabella picked up her violin. She began playing the same lullaby her mother had written so many years before. The melody filled the quiet garden. Alessandro closed his eyes. This time, the song no longer reminded him of everything he had lost. It reminded him of everything he had found. When the final note faded, Isabella walked toward him. With tears in her eyes, she smiled softly. I think... She paused, struggling to hold back her emotions. I've waited my whole life to say this. Alessandro looked at her. Dad. He wrapped his arms around his daughter, and for the first time in 25 years, the feared Mafia boss cried without shame. Not because of grief, but because hope had finally brought his family home. Sometimes, the smallest melody can survive the darkest secrets. And sometimes, the people we never stop searching for are only one miracle away. If this story touched your heart, let us know in the comments, what would you have done if you were Alessandro? Could you ever forgive a betrayal like Victor's? And if you enjoy powerful stories filled with emotion, mystery, and unforgettable endings, don't forget to subscribe, follow, and turn on notifications so you never miss our next story. Your support helps us bring more incredible stories like this to life. Until next time, thank you for watching.